Rain poured down from the dark sky. Thick clouds covered the canyon as water ran between the rocks. The sound of thunder rolled above, but it was nothing compared to the deep, slow sound of a train in the distance. Red light glowed through, the mist growing brighter with every second. She was on her knees. Her name was Nelia, once proud, once respected among her people. Now chained to the train tracks, soaking wet, bruised, cold, and shaking. Her arms were tied behind her back. A broken chain wrapped around her waist. Her long black hair stuck to her wet face. Her alien skin shimmered blue in the rain. Her ears, long and pointed, twitched every time thunder cracked. No one came. She had screamed for hours. Her voice had grown weak. She cried, but no one answered. Her own people had betrayed her, said she was dangerous, said she deserved this. She wasn't even allowed a trial. They just left her there to be killed by the train. And now? The train was coming. The red lights got closer. She could feel the track vibrate under her knees. Her heart raced, but her body was too weak to move. The chains were tight. There was no way out. Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "I don't want to die?" Then dash footsteps, heavy boots splashing in the water. Someone was running fast. From the side of the canyon, a human appeared through the rain. He stopped, frozen, when he saw her. He had never seen someone like her before. She was alien, clearly not from Earth, but she didn't look dangerous. She looked helpless. "Hey, are you? What is this?" He shouted. Nelia tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. The human rushed forward. He dropped to his knees in front of her. His clothes were soaked, his face full of confusion and worry. "Who did this to you?" he asked, reaching for the chains. She shook her head quickly. "You have to go. Train. Coming." He looked behind her. The train was getting closer. Fast. The red lights were now bright. The sound was loud, but he didn't move away. "Hold on," he said. He pulled out a small tool from his backpack, a metal cutter. It wasn't made for heavy chains, but it was all he had. Nelia looked at him with wide eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He just started cutting. The chain was strong. The tool sparked. The train's horn blasted through the canyon like a monster's roar. Still, he kept cutting. Come on, he said to himself. The train was seconds away. Nelia turned her head. She could see the front of it now. She closed her eyes. But then snap. The chain broke. The human grabbed her and pulled her off the tracks with all his strength. They rolled into the mud just as the train thundered past them. The ground shook. Wind and rain slapped them both. And then it was gone. Silence. He lay beside her, breathing hard. His hands were cut. His clothes were dirty. But he smiled. "You're safe now," he said softly. Nelia turned to look at him. Her lips trembled. She didn't know what to say. Who are you?" she asked. "Name's Kyle," he said. "Just a guy who takes the long way home." Oh, she stared at him. "You could have died." He gave a small laugh. "So could you." For the first time in hours, Nelia let herself breathe. The fear was still inside her, but so was something else. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Kyle stood up and reached out his hand. "Can you walk?" She nodded slowly and took his hand as he helped her to her feet. Kyle looked into her alien eyes. "I don't know what happened to you," he said, "but you're not alone anymore." And in that moment, under the cold rain and stormy skies, something changed in both of them. One had lost everything. The other had nothing to lose. But together, they had just started something new. The rain didn't stop. It kept falling like sharp needles, soaking the rocky path ahead of them. Kyle helped Nelia walk slowly through the canyon. She could barely keep her balance. Her legs were weak, and the broken chains still clung to her waist like ghosts from her past. Kyle looked around. "We need shelter," he said. "We'll freeze." Out here, Nelia said nothing. Her eyes were wide, but her lips stayed closed. The human had saved her, but she didn't know why. No one had ever helped her before, not without wanting something in return. Kyle spotted a cave entrance just ahead, hidden behind thick vines and shadows. It was dark and quiet. "This way," he said. Inside the cave, the air was dry but cold. Kyle gently set Nelia down on a flat rock and took off his jacket. He wrapped it around her shoulders without saying a word. She looked up at him. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I didn't need to," he replied. "You were about to die. That's enough." She stared at the ground. The silence between them was long, but not empty then. Kyle finally asked, "Who did this to you?" Nelia's hands tightened into fists. Her voice shook. "My people. The ones I trusted." Kyle frowned. "Why?" She looked up. Her eyes filled with tears. "They said I betrayed them, that I gave information to outsiders. But I didn't. I swear I didn't. Someone framed me. They said I was a traitor and chained me for the train." Kyle sat down beside her, and no one tried to stop it. She shook her head. "Not even my sister. Not even my father." Kyle clenched his jaw. "That's not justice," he said. "That's cruelty." Nelia turned her head and stared into the darkness of the cave. They didn't want justice. They wanted silence. Kyle could feel her pain. It wasn't just about the chains. It was about being abandoned, being thrown away like she didn't matter. But she did matter. At least to him now. Kyle stood up and grabbed a small device from his backpack. It looked like a black metal egg with blue lights. "What is that?" Nelia asked. "Heat unit," he replied. "Military grade. Keeps caves warm when you're stuck in alien storms." He placed it near the cave wall. The device lit up and began to hum, slowly warming the air around them. Nelia let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her body relaxed slightly. "You're not a soldier," she said quietly. "Why do you carry that?" Kyle gave a half smile. "Because this galaxy isn't kind to wanderers like me. You never know what you'll find. Or who." She studied him again. There was something strange about him, not just his human features, but his energy. He didn't ask for her story out of fear or curiosity. He asked because he cared. "You could have left me," she said. "You should. That train almost killed you too." Kyle looked at the glowing heat unit, then back at her. "Maybe I've seen too many people walk away," he said. "I couldn't be one of them." She didn't know what to say. Her eyes dropped to the broken chain still locked around her ankle. Its edges were sharp. Blood had dried along her skin. Kyle noticed. "Let me try," he said, walking closer. She flinched. "I won't hurt you," he added. She slowly nodded. He knelt beside her and pulled out a small multi-tool with adjustable arms and a cutter. It was old and scratched, but it's powerful. Kyle began to work on the chain. Tick dash, tick dash, tick. Each adjustment tightened his grip on the lock. The metal creaked. "This thing's tough," he muttered. Nelia winced as the cutter bit into the metal. Her hands dug into the jacket he gave her, but she stayed still. "Almost there," Kyle said. The cutter sparked suddenly dash click. The lock gave way and the chain fell off. Nelia looked down at her freed ankle in disbelief. "You did it," she whispered. Kyle smiled and stood up, wiping sweat from his brow. "One down." She touched her bare skin where the chain had been. It felt strange, like she was finally breathing. But then a sound outside. A faint mechanical beep. Nelia froze. "That sound," she whispered. "A tracking drone." Kyle grabbed his bag. "We need to move." "Now?" She stood, even with shaking legs. "If they find us, they'll call the hunters." Kyle nodded. "Then let's make sure we're gone before they do." As they stepped out into the rain once again, Nelia looked back at the cave. The chains were gone, but the danger was just beginning. The rain had finally stopped, but the air still smelled like metal and smoke. Clouds hung low over the canyon, and the ground was slippery under their feet. Nelia walked beside Kyle, her body tired, but her eyes alert. Every sound in the distance made her flinch. Every shadow looked like a threat. Kyle noticed. "You okay?" he asked gently. She didn't answer right away. Her hand touched the spot where the chain had cut her ankle. "They'll come," she finally said. "They always do." "Who?" Kyle asked, slowing his pace. She looked around, then pulled him into the cover of a large stone wall. Her voice was low. "They're called Seekers. They track, capture, and return fugitives. For a price, I'm their most valuable prize." Kyle raised an eyebrow. Why? Nelia looked away. "Because I'm not just anyone. I was born into the high circle of Arvox Prime. I'm the daughter of the council head." Kyle blinked. "Right. You're royalty." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Was? Now I'm a traitor with a price on my head." Kyle leaned against the wall, thinking hard. "So they framed you, to remove you from power." Nelia nodded slowly. "There was a vote. One I refused to support. They wanted to approve something terrible, mass displacement of an entire species. I stood against it, and that made you a target. They called it treason." Kyle crossed his arms. "So they chained you to a train track to silence your voice." Nelia looked down. No trial. No defense. Just betrayal. He studied her for a moment. She didn't look like a warrior, but she had survived what most couldn't. That meant something. "You're not broken," Kyle said. "They just want you to believe you are." Her lips trembled slightly. No one had said that to her before. They kept moving through the rocky path. Kyle led them toward an old abandoned mining outpost he had passed 2 days ago. It was off-grid, no cameras, no satellites. Just rusted machines and silence. "Do you trust me?" he asked as they walked. Nelia hesitated, then nodded. "You're the only one who stopped." That was enough. The outpost came into view by midday. Broken walls. Fallen towers. Long metal arms that once lifted heavy rock now hung useless. A perfect place to hide. They stepped inside a large storage room. Kyle checked for any signs of movement. Nothing. Dust covered the floor. Rats had made homes in the corners. Not cozy, he said, but better than being tracked. He pulled out a canister of purified water and handed it to her. She drank slowly, her hands still shaking. "You could have walked away," she said again, softly. "Why didn't you?" Kyle sat down on a crate. "'Cause I've seen what happens when people stay silent. I used to work in a human colony. We had a girl maybe 10 years old get accused of stealing food. No proof. Just a lie. They locked her in a container and forgot about her." He stared at the wall. "I couldn't sleep for weeks after that." Nelia listened, her heart heavy. Kyle looked at her. "I'm not a hero, but maybe this time I can do something right." Before she could reply, a noise, a small beep. Nelia's face went pale. "They found us." Kyle grabbed his scanner and ran to the broken window. A small flying drone hovered nearby, scanning the area with a red light. "Get down," he whispered. The drone flew past, but didn't stop. Then it turned back and hovered in place. "Too late," Nelia whispered. Kyle grabbed his blaster from the bag. "Can you run?" "No," she said. "They won't come with guns. They'll come with nets. Traps, paralysis tech. They want me alive." Kyle cursed under his breath. A loud sound shook the ground to ship landing nearby. They both knew what it meant. "The Seekers were here. We can't outrun them," she said. "Then we outsmart them." He reached for a broken mining machine in the corner, a rusted loader with a power cell still intact. "I'll cause a distraction," Kyle said. "You slip through the back and head east. There's a river 2 miles down. Follow it until you see a bridge. I'll meet you there." Nelia grabbed his hand. "What if they take you?" He looked into her eyes. "Then keep running. Make this rescue mean something." She didn't want to let go, but she had to. She slipped through the back door, her heart pounding as Kyle turned toward the sound of approaching footsteps and the blinking red light of a drone. He smiled, because for once in his life, he knew exactly what he was fighting. Kyle crouched behind a rusted mining loader, gripping his blaster tightly. His heart pounded. His clothes were still damp from the rain, and his boots squished slightly with every step on the metal floor. Outside, the sound of a ship's engines died down and silence filled the air. Then Dash footsteps, heavy, slow, and precise. They weren't rushing. They were confident, like wolves who had already cornered their prey. Kyle peeked out from behind the loader and saw them. 3 Seekers, armored beings with helmets that glowed faint red. Their suits were black and silver, with sharp lines and strange weapons attached to their backs. They walked in formation, one scanning with a tracker, one with a net gun, and a third holding a blade that shimmered with electric light. Kyle took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Let's give them a welcome." He reached down and twisted the loader's old power cell. It buzzed and sparked. Then he kicked a metal rod into the open circuit boom. The loader exploded in a burst of sparks and smoke, the room filled with flashing light and ringing noise. One of the Seekers stumbled backward, stunned. Another raised his net gun and fired but missed. Kyle ran across the storage room, using the smoke as cover. But the third Seeker wasn't fooled. He moved fast, too fast. His blade whirled as he stepped out of the smoke and struck. Kyle ducked just in time, but the blade sliced across his jacket. Sparks flew. The Seeker lunged again. Kyle raised his blaster and fired once, twice. One shot hit the Seeker's leg, causing him to stumble, but the second shot hit a nearby fuel drum. Boom. The side wall exploded, and Kyle was thrown backward into a pile of crates. His vision blurred. His body ached. But he was alive. The Seekers recovered quickly. The one with the tracker shouted something in a strange alien language. "She's not here," he growled. "The human delayed us." "Then finish him," the leader replied. Kyle tried to move, but his leg was bleeding and his arm felt numb. The blade-wielding Seeker stepped closer. "Where is she?" he asked in perfect English. Kyle spit blood from his mouth. "Too far for you." The Seeker raised his blade, but before he could strike up, strange humming sound echoed through the air. Then a flash of blue light from above. The roof cracked open slightly, and a glowing orb shot down, hitting the ground between Kyle and the Seeker. Flash. A burst of smoke and energy blinded everyone. Kyle looked up, dazed, and saw her Nelia. She stood at the broken opening, her hands glowing with a strange alien device attached to her wrist. Her hair was blowing in the wind, her eyes sharp, and her body steady. She had come back. "You left me," Kyle said, stunned. She jumped down beside him and raised her arm. The device fired another blast, pushing 2 Seekers off their feet. "I remembered who I was," she said. "And I don't run from monsters anymore." The Seekers quickly regrouped. One tried to fire the net gun at her, but she moved with a warrior's speed, rolling to the side and sending a shockwave blast from her wrist device. Kyle stared at her, amazed. "You never said you could fight." She didn't look at him. "You never asked." The leader seeker growled and raised his blade again. But this time, Kyle stood, bloody and limping. He lifted his blaster. "We do this together," he said. Nelia nodded. The battle was fast and wild. 2 humans against 3. Elite hunters. Kyle fired and distracted them, while Nelia used her wrist tech and quick feet to disable their gear. They moved like they'd trained together for years. Even though they'd only met the day before, the final blow came when Nelia activated a hidden setting on her device and electromagnetic pulse. FCZ-ZZZZZCCT. All 3 seekers collapsed, their suits shutting down instantly. Silence fell. Kyle leaned on a crate, breathing heavily. "You didn't have to come back," he said. Nelia looked at him, her face soft now. "Yes, I did. You gave me my life back. I won't waste it by running." He smiled, even through the pain. "You're stronger than most soldiers I know." She looked away. "I wasn't. Not until you showed me what real courage looks like. A dare." The faint hum of more ships approaching in the far distance. "We have to go," Kyle said. Double quotes, "Yes," she nodded. "But this time, we run to something not away." And with that, they vanished into the wilds together, bonded not by blood or species, but by choice. The sky turned gold as the twin suns began to rise behind the cliffs. The storm had passed, but the canyon still echoed with the memory of battle. Nelia and Kyle moved quietly through the brush, staying low, watching the skies. Somewhere behind them, the disabled seekers were likely calling for backup. They didn't have much time. Kyle's steps were slower now. His leg had been injured badly during the explosion. Every time he put weight on it, he winced. "Let me help," Nelia said, offering her arm. "I'm fine," he replied through gritted teeth. "You're not," she said gently, "and I didn't come back to watch you fall." He gave in and leaned on her. She was smaller than him, but strong, surprisingly strong. They reached a rocky ledge overlooking a quiet valley. In the distance, a communication tower blinked red, an old human relay station. It was their only hope now. "If we can reach that station," Kyle said, breathing heavily, "we can call the Human Federation. Get a ship. Get out of here." Nelia nodded. "It won't be easy. That tower is in neutral space. The Federation won't be able to land close. We crawl if we have to." Kyle muttered. They started climbing down the rocky slope. Kyle slipped once, nearly falling, but Nelia caught him in time. Her fingers dug into the rock, pulling him back with a grunt of effort. "You've done this before?" he asked, impressed. "No," she said, smiling faintly. "But I've watched enough fools climb cliffs on Arvax Prime." They both laughed for the first time in hours. It didn't last long. Suddenly, high-pitched whistle cut through the air. Kyle's eyes widened. Sniper drone. Before he could react, the drone fired. The blast hit a rock near them and exploded, sending sharp debris in every direction. Kyle was thrown backward, hitting the ground with a hard thud. His head spun. Blood ran down his forehead. Nelia didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward him, ignoring the second drone flying in above. Her wrist device charged with a low hum. She fired a pulse at the first drone direct hit. The machine spun out of control and smashed into the rocks. But the second drone fired right at Kyle. Nelia didn't think. She leaped forward, covering his body with her own. The blast hit her in the back. She screamed loud, sharp, and full of pain. Kyle blinked. Through the smoke and dust, he felt her fall against him. Nelia. She was breathing hard, face twisted with pain. The back of her shirt was burned, and blood trickled down her side. Her body trembled, but her arms held firm around him. "You idiot," Kyle whispered, trying to lift her. "Why would you do that?" "Because you saved me," she said, her voice weak. Twice, he held her tightly, angry at the world, angry at himself. She tried to smile through the pain. "Besides, it's kind of nice being the hero for once." Kyle carefully picked her up in his arms. His legs screamed in protest, but he didn't stop. The second drone circled again. He aimed his blaster with one hand and fired without thinking. The shot connected. The drone exploded in the sky. He kept walking. The relay tower was still far, but he didn't care. He was going to get her there no matter what. It took nearly an hour, but Kyle finally reached the foot of the relay tower. Nelia was barely conscious in his arms. He set her down under the steel beams and connected his data drive to the console. "Come on. Just give me a signal," he muttered. A green light blinked. The screen flashed. "Connection found. Federation emergency line open." Kyle hit the button and spoke quickly. "This is Kyle Mercer, independent contractor, Terran ID 734. I have a wounded alien female, high value target, wrongfully hunted. We need extraction now." The voice on the other side replied, "Location locked, ship dispatched, ETA to 20 minutes. Hold your ground." Kyle sighed and turned to Nelia. "Help is coming," he whispered. She opened her eyes slightly. "You stayed," he smiled. "You risked everything for me. Did you really think I'd leave now?" She reached up with her hand, weak and shaking. Her fingers brushed his cheek. "I was just a prisoner, just a traitor. Until I met you." Kyle took her hand and held it tightly. "You're more than what they said you were. You're brave, you're kind, you're worth saving." Tears rolled down her face. Not from pain, but from something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Above them, the sound of an approaching Federation ship filled the air. They had survived together. The Federation ship hovered like a silent giant above the valley. Its smooth silver hull reflected the first rays of daylight. Long landing struts extended from its belly, hissing softly as they touched the rocky ground near the relay tower. The ship's side door opened, and armored medics rushed out with hover stretchers. Kyle stood protectively beside Nelia, who lay weak but alive beneath the tower. Her clothes were burned, her face pale, but her eyes still shone with quiet strength. A medic scanned her. "She's stable," he said. "We'll get her to the medical bay right away." Kyle nodded but didn't step back. A second team approached him, weapons lowered but hands near their holsters. One of them, a tall woman with short gray hair and a captain's badge, stepped forward. "Mercer," she said, "I'm Captain Isla Rowe of the Terran Federation. We received your emergency call and your transmission about the girl." "Not a criminal," Kyle said before she could say anything more. "She's innocent. She was set up." Rowe narrowed her eyes. "I've read the bounty alerts. She's listed as Arvox Priority Red. That makes her a galactic fugitive." Kyle stepped in front of Nelia. "That bounty is based on lies. Her people tried to silence her for standing against a political purge. They left her chained on train tracks to die. I saw it myself." The soldiers looked at each other. "And what exactly do you want us to do about it?" Rowe asked. Kyle didn't blink. "I want you to grant her asylum. And I want to speak before the Interspecies Justice Council." The entire landing team went still. "Asylum," Rowe repeated, shocked. "You realize what you're asking? We'd be risking political war with Arvox Prime?" Kyle nodded. "Then let it be risked, 'cause doing nothing makes us no better than no." The ones who tied her to those tracks? There was silence. The wind rustled through the dry grass. Captain Rose studied Kyle for a long time. "Why her?" she asked. "Why put your life, your career, your future on the line for a stranger?" Kyle looked down at Nelia, who was now half conscious, barely hearing their voices. "She's not a stranger," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Inside the ship, Nelia was treated with advanced medical tech. Her wounds were cleaned. The burns healed rapidly with regen gel. Tea, but she didn't speak much. She watched Kyle from across the room, silent, wide-eyed. When she could finally sit up, she whispered, "Why are you still here?" Kyle pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed. "Because you stayed for me," he said. "Now I stay for you." She looked down. "I'm not worth this. You saw how everyone treats me." Even the Federation hesitated. Kyle reached for her hand. "I don't care what they see. I see someone brave. Someone who speaks up even when it costs everything." Her throat tightened. Her fingers gripped his. She didn't need to speak. He already understood later. Kyle was brought before a secure Federation Council meeting through a live link. Holographic representatives from multiple species appeared around the table, some humanoid, others with glowing eyes or reptilian features. Captain Rowe stood beside him. As he gave his testimony, he told them everything. The betrayal, the false charges, the chains, the approaching train, the drones, the fight. He ended with one sentence: "If you return her to Arvox Prime, you're not sending back a criminal, you're sending back a victim to die in silence." The room was quiet. One alien delegate hissed, "You ask us to damage relations with one of our oldest allies? On what basis?" Kyle raised his head. "On the basis of truth." Another delegate leaned forward. "What do you propose, Mercer?" Kyle took a deep breath. "Make her voice louder than theirs. Let her speak too. The galaxy. Give her sanctuary, and give her a platform to expose what's happening on Arvax Prime. That's how you stop evil, by letting the ones who suffered tell the story." The delegates whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads, others nodded. Slowly, it was clear the galaxy was watching. Back in the medical bay, Nelia waited. Her heart beat fast. She felt more scared now than when she had been chained to those tracks. Then Kyle walked in. She sat up quickly. "What happened?" "What did they say?" Kyle smiled gently. "You're not going back," he said. "You're safe now." Tears filled her eyes. She covered her face with her hands, trying not to sob. He sat beside her again. "They gave you asylum," he added. "And I want you to speak. Not just here, but across multiple systems." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't know if I can." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You already did when you chose not to stay silent. This is just the next step." For the first time in her life, Nelia didn't feel hunted or alone. She felt seen. She felt heard. She felt free. The grand hall of the Interspecies Justice Council was filled with silence. High above the crowd, floating platforms carried alien leaders, reporters, and envoys from across the galaxy. Light beams crossed the air, cameras recording every second. This wasn't just a speech, it was history. And, at the center of it all, stood Nelia, no longer bruised or chained, no longer afraid. She wore a long white robe gifted by the Federation. Her wrist device had been removed. She didn't need weapons anymore. Her voice would be her power now. She looked over the sea of faces, her eyes briefly finding Kyle in the front row. He nodded once. She took a deep breath and began. "I was born into the circle of Arvox Prime. I was taught that silence meant respect, that obedience was loyalty. But one day, I spoke against something cruel. I said no. Murmurs filled the air. I was framed for treason, chained to a rail, left to die." I was not rescued by my own people. I was saved by a human someone with no reason to care. Someone who risked everything to listen when no one else would. She looked down, her voice softening. I tell you this, not for pity, but for truth. If even one person, one human can choose kindness over fear, then we all can. Let justice begin, not with weapons, but with stories like mine. The hall was silent again, and then dash applause from every corner. Slowly, then rising. Even a few Arvox representatives stood, their expressions unsure, but respectful. After the session, Nelia walked out to the balcony where Kyle waited.
The stars.
Above were bright, quiet. He leaned against the railing. That was one hell of a speech. She smiled, walking up beside him. My legs were shaking the whole time. Couldn't tell, he said. You looked like a queen. She looked at him. Maybe not a queen, but, finally, something close to free. Kyle took a breath, looking up at the sky. So, what now? Nelia was quiet for a moment. Then, she said, the Federation offered me a post, a voice for displaced aliens. I'll travel, speak, try to change what I can. He smiled. Sounds perfect for you. And they want someone to accompany me, she added, looking at him sideways. He raised an eyebrow. Security. She shrugged playfully. Officially. But maybe also someone who's not afraid of explosions, alien politics, or chains. Kyle chuckled. That's a very short list. She stepped closer. You're at the top of it. His smile faded slightly, not in sadness, but in something deeper. Nelia, he said, voice softer now. When I first saw you, I didn't know your name. I didn't know your story. All I saw were eyes full of fear. She nodded. And I saw a human with mud on his boots and fire in his heart. He turned to face her fully. You changed me, he said. I used to just wander. Fix broken machines. Stay out of other people's stories. But saving you, being part of your fight, it made me feel like I mattered. Her eyes filled with tears again. But you always mattered, Kyle. She reached for his hand and held it gently. They called me a traitor, she whispered. You, without knowing anything, you gave me something I never had. What's that? A place I belonged. He looked into her eyes. Then, let's build a new one, together. She smiled, and this time, there was no pain behind it, just peace. Weeks passed together. They traveled to distant colonies, to courts and refugee camps. Wherever they went, Nelia told her story. And Kyle stood at her side, not as her guard, or her savior, but as her partner. One day, on a quiet moon with purple skies, a child tugged at Nelia's robe and asked, "Are you a hero?" She knelt down, smiling. "No," she said gently. "But I was saved by one." Behind her, Kyle laughed and shook his head. "She's lying. She's the brave one." The child giggled and ran away. Nelia stood and looked at Kyle. "Maybe we?" "Both were saved," she said. He nodded. "Yeah," he whispered, "by each other." And as the sun set on the horizon of another alien world, two unlikely souls, one once chained, the other once lost, walked side by side into a future they had chosen for themselves. Not bound by blood, not bound by duty, but by something far stronger. Family.